Hello and welcome, I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories of the hour. Victims of Jeffrey Epstein criticised the US government after the release of heavily redacted case files with some document and images blacked out or even missing. The Justice Department says more records will be released, but survivors say the disclosures offer little transparency or new information. 9 people are killed and 10 wounded when gunmen opened fire at a licensed tavern in Bakasdal near Johannesburg. Police say multiple suspects fled the scene and a manhunt is underway as investigators work to determine a motive. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese announces a review of police and intelligence agencies after the Bondi Beach attack is declared a terrorist incident. 15 people are killed in the shooting at a Jewish festival, with police saying the gunmen were inspired by Islamic State. The Kremlin denies that three-way talks between Russia, Ukraine and the United States are being prepared, despite diplomatic meetings in Miami. President Vladimir Putin's aide says proposals from Ukraine and Europe do not improve the chances of reaching a long-term peace. The French presidency says it welcomes Russian President Vladimir Putin's readiness to speak with President Emmanuel Macron. Paris says the terms and format of any talks will be decided in the coming days. Ukrainian President Zelensky says Russia is trying to cut Ukraine off from the Black Sea after intensified strikes on ports and energy sites. He says the attacks target Odessa and key trade routes as Moscow steps up drone and missile assaults. Israel's Security Cabinet approves the establishment of 19 new settlements in the occupied West Bank, according to an official statement. The decision brings the total number of settlements approved in the past 3 years to 69 and are seen as illegal under international law. The United States intercepts an oil tanker off the coast of Venezuela in international waters, a move that comes just days after US President Donald Trump announced a blockade of all sanctioned oil tankers entering and leaving Venezuela. We start this hour in South Asia, and India's Ministry of External Affairs has responded to media queries about a protest in front of the Bangladesh High Commission in New Delhi today. Official spokesman Randir Jaiswal clarified that around 20 to 25 youths gathered to protest the killing of Dipu Chandra to call for minority protection in Bangladesh. Jaiswal emphasised that the protest was peaceful, with no attempts to breach security, and that police dispersed the group very quickly. He noted that visual evidence of the event is publicly available, and India reaffirmed its commitment to protecting foreign missions on its soil, in line with the Vienna Convention. The ministry also stated that India is closely monitoring developments in Bangladesh and has communicated strong concerns over attacks on minorities. Officials have urged Bangladeshi authorities to bring the perpetrators of Dasa's killing to justice. Joining us now is Ambassador Veena Sikri, a former High Commissioner of India to Bangladesh. She joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much for joining us, Ambassador Sikri, here on NewsX World. Of course, India has expressed strong concerns over these attacks on minorities in Bangladesh. In diplomatic terms, how strong do you think that message actually is? And do you think Dhaka will currently be taking it seriously?
Well, you know that right from July, August last year, I would say right from the 5th of August when Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina left Dhaka and came to Delhi, right from that very minute, the two strong things happened all across Bangladesh. The first of these were the attacks on the minorities, the Hindus, the Buddhists, the Christians, and Sufis and Ahmadiyyas as well. and it has gone on horrifically. I mean, thousands of people have been affected and died, and India has conveyed our concern right from that moment on, even on the 8th of August when Prime Minister Modi sent the message of felicitations to Dr. Mohammed Yunus. Even in that message, he had said, very clearly that we would request that you look after the minorities, because even in those 4 days, there had been such disastrous results. But the government of Bangladesh has been really ignoring it, and they have been dismissing it. And in fact, Dr. Mohammed Yunus, whenever he's traveled abroad and he's asked about it, he says, oh, fake news from India. So this has been a very worrisome trend for India, because not only have there been rapes and lynchings and killings and destruction of property, taking over businesses, Hindu professors have been forced to resign, primary school teachers have been forced to resign by mobs. They surround them and come on. And this killing day before yesterday, exactly at the time, very soon after, when Osman Hadi, the student leader, had been shot dead. It was absolutely barbaric. It was medieval. It isn't even, nothing that can have any place in the 21st century. This person, Dipu Chandra, a young person working in a garment factory, just a false rumor was started against him, I think by a colleague who wanted to get his own back on him for some private problem. And he said, oh, he has said something insulting Prophet Muhammad. And the entire factory erupted. The mob surrounded the factory, and the factory management has said, oh, we had to give him to the mob because otherwise the factory would have been burned down. And so, they just gave him to the mob, and the mob, they not only beat him to death, they dragged his dead body across, I don't know how many yards to the highway, put him on a stake, burnt the dead body, and then threw him on the highway. It was so barbaric that it has been really shocking to everybody in India that this can happen in the modern world in this way. And we have, of course, conveyed it very strongly. And in the media coverage was so much across India that this time Mohammed Yunus could not dismiss it as fake news from India. And he did say that some people have been arrested. But there's no knowing, what's going to happen, because in previous cases, when we had taken it up earlier, they say, yes, some people have been arrested, but we then gather that they've promptly been released on bail. So there's no checking them, there's no punishment, there's no, retribution of the situation at all. Rather, the people who perpetrate it, they get encouraged to do it further. And that is why today, as you've noticed, that there was a very peaceful demonstration in front of the Bangladesh High Commission in Delhi. But you do know that after the killing of Sharif Osman Hadi that I just spoke about, within minutes, the government of Dhaka called in the Indian High Commissioner saying that India is responsible, and following that, the mobs were again out on the streets, chanting anti-India slogans, trying to surround the Indian High Commission in Dhaka. They went to the Assistant High Commission's office in Rajshahi and Khulna, and then they spent the whole night outside the Assistant High Commission office in Chittagong as well. So there's been a very difficult time for India's diplomatic representatives in Bangladesh, and we have certainly conveyed it to the Bangladesh High Commissioner in Delhi also in no uncertain terms. So this rise of Islamic radicalization, the really free hand being given to the Jamaat-e-Islami backed groups is really frightening, because if you see 2 days ago there were visuals in all the media in Bangladesh showing carrying a Bangladesh flag topped by an ISIS flag. And there was no response anywhere in the Bangladesh media, just the visual, and that's all. And I still remember a few months ago when one of the Hindu community, Chinmoy Das, had been doing a peaceful march in Bangladesh against the killings of the Hindus and the other minorities. And a photograph which came out of, they were carrying the Bangladesh flag, but the photograph showed that the flag at the back, which was the flag of, I think, the Sanatan Dharam, in the photograph it appeared to be a little higher. There was such a hue and cry in Bangladesh about that. But now with the ISIS flag, nobody is even taking it as anything amiss. So it really worries me about the strong radicalization, the taking over of the civil society space in Bangladesh by extremist elements, by radicalized groups. Whether it's the Jaish-e-Mohammed and Lashkar-e-Taiba, they say they're there. ISIS is clearly there. And all these groups are conducting their own activities.
Right. Ambassador, of course, in 2026, we lead into February, which is when, of course, an election is meant to take place. What do you think, given the current political instability in Dhaka, is the likeliness of these elections being free and fair, as Mohammed Yunus's interim government has promised?
Well, the one thing is that Mohammed Yunus's interim government, interim regime, because it's not a government, it's an unconstitutional body. It has not been appointed by anybody, it's a self-appointed body, and they've taken oath on a constitution which has no provision for an interim regime. So in any which way, they are unconstitutional. Of course, the interim regime had no interest at all in holding early elections. It's just pressure from the people of Bangladesh. Pressure from them saying, no, we want all the political parties say that we want early elections, and then the dates in February have been announced. But the key word that Dr. Mohammed Yunus leaves out of all his statements on the elections is inclusivity. And he may talk, how can he talk of free and fair elections when they're not inclusive? When the Awami League has been banned, when its activities have been banned, the Jatiya Party is not being allowed to take part, the 14-party alliance is not being allowed to take part. How can you cherry pick for a democratic election? And I do not know why the Western media is not even talking about all of this. I am so surprised, because I do not think in any of their countries they would ever allow an election to take place without the major parties being represented. So how can an interim regime which has no constitutional position suddenly declare on its own that a party will not take part? And when Dr. Mohammed Yunus was interviewed in New York a couple of months ago in September, I think, by a foreign media representative, so he was asked, so why have you banned the Awami League? He said, no, I have not banned the Awami League, only the activities of the Awami League have been banned. And then he was asked, so will the Awami League be allowed to take part in the elections? He says that's up to the Election Commission. So now, you know, it's a question of passing the buck.
Yes.
And it's a very difficult situation, because unless you have inclusive elections, number one, the elections will not be credible. Number two, you know, the exact same situation in which the people of Bangladesh or Mohammed Yunus and others were blaming Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina that the elections she held under her regime, her government, were not inclusive, although she never banned any party, but the BNP chose not to take part. And the Jamaat-e-Islami was not taking part because after a court case, you know, the Jamaat-e-Islami had said that they don't recognize the constitution of Bangladesh as being superior to the Quran. And so that was the reason that the Jamaat-e-Islami was not there. And at that time they were, and now they're doing exactly the same thing. You know, they're sort of cherry picking and saying that, you know, what they were accusing Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina of, they're doing exactly the same thing, and the people are unhappy about it. So
Yes.
I think the insecurity and the instability and the violence and all that is likely to continue unless they agree to have free, fair and inclusive elections, credible elections, participatory elections, and then whoever wins, it's perfectly all right. Any party can win. In fact, Pratham Alu, the leading vernacular daily of Bangladesh, with a circulation of 7.6 million online and print, they published a national opinion survey about 4 or 5 days ago, maybe a week ago, and in that they said that 70% of the people of Bangladesh, those surveyed, said they want Awami League to take part in the elections. It doesn't mean those 70% are going to vote for the Awami League, not at all. It's just that the majority of the people want Awami League to take part so that
Yes.
it can described as a free, fair and inclusive election. And they can vote for any party they wish to, and whoever gets the more votes will win, and that's absolutely fine. But without these inclusive elections, there is going to be a huge problem.
And Ambassador Sikri, thank you very much for joining us here in NewsX World. It's a pleasure to get your insight. Of course, we'll continue to cover Bangladesh and the ongoing situation there as it develops. We now move over to Europe for our next story. And Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said the US suggested a trilateral format for talks with Russia, but he doubts it will lead to progress. Russian officials have downplayed the initiative, with Kremlin advisor Yuri Ushakov saying no serious preparations are underway. Zelensky noted that the United States, European and Ukrainian negotiations are moving at a fairly rapid pace, but warned progress depends on Russia's willingness to end the war. Russian envoy Kirill Dmitriev visited Miami for talks before returning to Moscow. The United States previously presented a 28-point plan for ending the war, seen as compromising with Russia. But the plan has been revised after Kyiv and European input. Moscow continues military advances in eastern Ukraine on the ground, with Putin recently praising Russian gains. While direct Ukraine-Russia talks remain unlikely, Putin expressed readiness to speak with French President Emmanuel Macron, a move welcomed by France if done transparently with allies. Joining us now is Shruti Dasgupta. She is an international affairs expert. She joins us live from New Delhi. Shruti, thank you very much for joining us. Of course, Moscow have said, despite reports, that they deny that a trilateral meeting is on the cards between Ukrainian, United States and a Russian delegation. Why is the Kremlin so reluctant to have all three parties in the same room to negotiate a peace deal?
Greetings, Thomas. Thank you so much for inviting me. What I understand is that Kremlin is wary of how Ukraine tries to use every meeting to project a global image out there of power and of control of the narrative when it has none. If you're losing 12 to 17 square kilometers per day, you have actually lost the war. And Zelensky and his people are very often say something at the table and then they go back on it in a matter of hours in public platforms, and it becomes really difficult for any kind of diplomatic process to go forth. I will give an example of it. We were debating a few days ago about whether the EU loan will go through or not, or what is that situation going to be like with the Russian assets. There, they found that they could not use the Russian assets. They had to process the loan. So they went ahead with the loan, and within hours of that loan being sanctioned by EU, and only 24 countries, mind you, out of those 27 that make EU, Zelensky goes out and says that he will not pay back the loan until and unless it comes from Russia as part of reparations. Is that not the same thing? How can you be deciding the terms of loan you take to fight your enemy, whom you're losing to, but expect them to pay off your loan? That doesn't make sense. So he goes out in public and makes an entire spectacle of the democratic processes or diplomatic processes, and Kremlin just doesn't want anything to do with them. They know that this is a NATO war. If USA backs out of this entire conversation, Europe will not be able to fund it or support Zelensky for very long. So they are speaking only with USA, ensuring that the peace plan goes out, and then USA can deal with its vassals in the NATO alliance and Zelensky, and to ensure that peace comes to Europe. They're not against peace, they're just against the entire drama that comes out of it.
Okay, Shruti, do stay with us as we have further updates, but this time coming out of the United States. And questions are growing over missing files from a set of documents released by the US Justice Department. Democrats on the House Oversight Committee have raised concerns after noting that several image files available earlier no longer appear on the department's website. At least 15 images are now missing, according to comparisons made between the original release and the material online. The removed files reportedly include photos of a room with what appears to be a message table, as well as nude images and paintings. Also no longer accessible are images of framed photographs, including one appearing to show Pope John Paul II and another showing President Donald Trump, Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell together. It is not clear why the files were taken down or altered. The Justice Department has so far not responded to requests for clarification on the discrepancy. Shruti, yesterday it was supposed to be a big day for the release of these files. This has been a bipartisan issue. Of course, both Democrats and Republicans voted together after Donald Trump's backing to release these files. However, now it seems speculation will not go away, as we see plenty of redactions, even after there was only two points here that things were supposed to be redacted with. One, ongoing and active cases, and the other, of course, anything that identified victims. Donald Trump hasn't seen the end of this, has he?
No, he hasn't, and it's going to become a bigger albatross around his neck, if I can use that particular frame, because the pictures that have gone missing are not just about Pope John II or any other major figure. It is also about Donald Trump and his wife, Melania. So this is, they were there with Ghislaine Maxwell as well as Jeffrey Epstein in that particular drawer. That photograph is, of course, otherwise available on internet, but from that drawer, if it goes away, it basically shows that a lot of redactions are not on just those 2 points, to protect victims or to protect the course of law. Again, I do not know there is an ongoing case on Epstein, related to Epstein or his workings. So why the clause of law? Unless they're hoping to release Ghislaine Maxwell, and that is where they're trying to find protection for themselves. Also missing is the photograph of an IDF t-shirt, which, by the way, is not the official t-shirt. It is just something that they buy at a souvenir shop. That has also gone away. So basically what I understand from the missing pictures, rather than the ones that have been published, is that they're trying to control what the narrative is going to be, at least in the first few tranches that are going to be released. Afterwards, when it kind of gets old and stale, they can kind of release whatever else they want to, and people will probably not go through it with a pitchfork to find an agenda politically. But right now, they're being very careful about what files they send out, who it shows, and who it protects. And unfortunately, this is not what the people voted for, this is not what the Congress voted for, and this is not what has been passed off as the Epstein bill. So it is definitely not going in the favor of Trump. In fact, it is looking as if he is complicit of much more than just attending parties and meeting the people that were there with Jeffrey Epstein.
Shruti Dasgupta, as always, thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World. Of course, we'll continue to bring you all the developing situations coming out in regards to that Epstein files release. We now move over to Africa, and the deadly shooting in Burkersdal Township near Johannesburg has been described as unprovoked and random by Gauteng Deputy Provincial Police Commissioner Major General Fred Kekana, who said victims were targeted while enjoying themselves. At least 9 people have been killed and 10 others wounded after around a dozen armed suspects arrived in 2 vehicles just before 1 a.m. local time, firing on patrons before fleeing. A large police operation has been deployed involving national and provincial crime scene teams, crime investigators and intelligence officers. Authorities have launched a coordinated search to identify and arrest those responsible. So far, no suspects have been identified and the motive for the attack remains unclear. Let's listen in to what the Deputy Provincial Commissioner, Major General of Gauteng, has to say.
Found people enjoying themselves out of the blue, unprovoked. They attacked, randomly shot the people en route, just on the same route down. The same criminals proceeded, met a Bolt driver, shot him unprovoked and disappeared. It's reported that it was plus minus 10 suspects, armed suspects. 9 of them had pistols and 1 had a AK-47 rifle. A horrible thing, something which is inhuman and cannot be allowed or tolerated. Therefore, those thugs and criminals who did this, we are not going to rest until we trace all of them. As a province, we are hard at work in order to remove illegal firearms. Amongst the festive season plan, in the plan, one of the focus areas is to remove unlicensed firearms and firearms that are licensed but people are found in possession of them while under influence of liquor, or they are not managing them properly.
Joining us now to discuss this in further detail is Ayanuga Olugbenga Paul. He's a public affairs analyst joining us live from the Nigerian capital of Lagos. Thank you very much for joining us, Ayanuga. It's always a pleasure to have you and talk to you on these issues. Of course, South Africa can be seen as being one of the more stable African countries. However, police have described this as a random, unprovoked attack. But in a country of South Africa's level of violent crime, how rare is a coordinated mass shooting like this?
Well, we can't say this is a rare case or a random shooting case, because just earlier this month, there was a mass shooting at an unlicensed tavern that left about 12 to 16 people dead, with 3 children among them, aged 3, 12, and 16, if I still remember correctly. And of course, just I think last week, a popular DJ in South Africa gunned down in broad daylight, also, just this month, I think a police, someone who gave testimony to the police about the corruption case, a whistleblower, was also gunned down in South Africa. And apart from that, there are a lot of gory pictures of carjacking, armed robbery that is very prevalent in South Africa, especially in the poverty-stricken areas of the country, which are predominantly black community, immigrant community, where there are immigrant hostels across the country. So we see this happening all the time. In fact, the fabric of humanity is so shredded that you see some of these criminals, willingly grant interview and boastfully speak about some of the despicable things that they've done in the past, and not necessarily because they have repented or they want people to learn from their mistake, but because they are boastful that they are still in the game. So it is a very terrible situation that we are having in South Africa, and this is basically fueled by drug, mining, tough control. It just have all the pictures that resemble the 1920 Prohibition era in the US, where there was gun violence on every street in the US, especially in the Chicago, Harlem area of the US. And if you just oppose those areas with these areas in South Africa, you will see that they are the black majority area where drugs are being sold freely.
Yes.
And so it looks to people like a tough protection by some of the drug gangs in the area, even though the police may not have been able to pinpoint exactly who is leading what or who is doing what, but it looks to me like a gun-related war in that country. And with the economic devastation and appetite that is still going on to the black community in South Africa, I don't think that this is going to stop anytime soon, because until the people, especially the black majority in that country, are economically emancipated, that they can begin to feel the proper feeling of dignity, of humanity to them,
Yes.
that is when they will begin to shun some of this violence. But for now, I don't see any respite in sight, because even the police is compromised as far as I'm concerned in some of these shootings and killings that is happening in that country.
Ayanuga Olugbenga Paul, thank you as always for joining us. It's always a pleasure to hear your insight on these issues. Well, that is all, unfortunately, that we have time for this hour. Keep watching NewsX World for more international updates.